Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Thank you for staying with us on Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Barnett. I'm here with Freeman.
And are you staying with us?
Well, we appreciate you staying with us because it takes us 2 segments to warm to the subject, to find the subject.
So, are you with us? Are you really with us? Sometimes we track better than others. I feel like we've been tracking actually fine. I hope that you're
this hooks
staying
up
with
a show we did like 2 Octobers back, so suddenly we made sense of that piece.
Yeah.
This is a giant jigsaw puzzle, and we lay in a piece here, we lay in a piece here, and between the two of us, we have no idea what the big picture is, and eventually this is going to look like something.
I think it does look like something. I mean, look, it's so interesting because the feedback I get, we both get, but I get a little more because I answer the emails and you don't, is that people are tracking with us. So I'm grateful for that. I want to come back to something about the stories because it's one of the things that it's not like I didn't know this in the past. I think I did, but I've had a kind of awareness lately because it's been in my face where there are stories that I've colluded with people, specifically a very good friend.
What do you mean by collude?
So, okay. So we talk about beliefs, agreements, and so forth. Agreement is where we have some...
You buy into a hand-me-down story that's not yours.
Well, and when we're trying to reinforce it, we run around trying to find people who are willing to collude with us. We're telling a particular story, and in order for us to do a certain dance, you have to agree that this is the story we're going with. Oh, that's the story we're going with. Yeah, that's the reality we're choosing. All right? This, again, is moving back into the me that can actually choose. But from the standpoint of not having a me that can actually choose, we're just running storylines and seeing who picks them up, and those are the people we hang out with. That's the truth.
Because we become who we're with.
Right. Well, and who we're with matches up with who we are, and and then we're running in these little packs of folks who all hold a certain belief structure, and that's the way the world works.
So I love that language. It's just more evocative to me that we run with people who share our worldviews.
That's it. So I
reinforce them.
Had a moment with a very dear friend who wanted me to collude with him on a story. And I couldn't. I mean, I just couldn't. There's no part of me that can go along with that at this point in my personal development. And in fact, it's interesting because there's actually 2 people involved. There's a third party who's another friend, a mutual friend. And there was all this, I got stuck in the middle of those 2 sort of having their moment too about what was wrong with each other. And it was really kind of insanity. But the one friend got really in crisis about me not colluding on the story and actually doesn't live in L.A., came to L.A., had to see me face to face because this was, in his mind, a crisis for our relationship. Big time. Like, you know, this is...
You betrayed him? Was that it? Or you...
Betrayal.
Abandoned him?
He felt misunderstood.
Unappreciated.
The whole thing. And I couldn't go along with the story. What I did do is I held an intent. And I showed up as authentically as I could, and I heard him for all the things, and you know, my coaching skills came in because I tracked a little bit with him, and I shared some, you know, and it's interesting. We've had 4 conversations since, and similar to what I was talking about in the last segment, there's a kind of miracle in just holding a deeper truth that's kind of allowed this to unwind, and he's not holding on to his story as tightly.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a piece in between that a missing piece in between? It's not missing, but that the light is not being shone on. You're holding a boundary, and you're holding a commitment to honor yourself with respect to not jumping in and buying into a worldview that is not yours.
It's a small story.
A story. And often, I bring this up because often, you know, our listeners, they may hear this and think, well, I can just draw lines in the sand all over the place and hold my worldview. And I think there's a very delicate balance here because we hold our positions, we hold them fast and we'll fight for them. And at the same time, we're willing to get off them at a moment's notice let me just finish the thought, if necessary. And the way one gets to that is that you are first aware of the one of you on the bench that is entirely in agreement with that story.
Right.
And you've dealt with the one of you on the bench that's entirely in agreement with that story so that you can move to a bigger story. But if we're not aware of the version of us on the bench, then we are tilting at windmills.
That's right.
We're doing shadow plays.
Yeah. And I don't want, the other missing piece in the story is I want to, his crisis and the idea of us losing our friendship meant something to me. I was in crisis. I was thrown by it too. And so part of what happened ultimately in us connecting was, you know, what you said in the beginning. He didn't feel heard. He didn't feel understood. He felt misunderstood. Da, da, da. All of that came up. And my assurance that I did want to hear him and I did care about him and so forth and so on is what carried us through. And then what I found is he was able to put down the story. The story wasn't that important when the fundamental sort of needs got met. And we were able to splash around in this a little.
So who created that?
Well,
the outcome.
I think the intention, honestly, the space between us, that I was willing to show up. Because there was a part of me, Barnett, that wanted to dismiss him and wanted to get defensive and or superior. I got it. He didn't get it. It's a small story. Don't tell that. But
who created all that?
We created it.
You mean you colluded in a story?
Oh, interesting.
Who created the story and who colluded in the story?
Yeah, the bigger story.
Who created the whole thing?
I did.
Great. So and what part of you created the first part?
It's good.
And then what part of you created the second part? Once so what I heard was like the anatomy of the whole discussion. I created this thing because there was a part of me that was so. I don't know if this is true. If I was making a movie of it, but it's a model.
Yeah.
I created it because there's a part of me that is so committed, that is so connected to this relationship that I'm afraid of losing it, and I'm feeling misunderstood and unappreciated, and I'm not really in touch with it. So it's out and it comes at me in the form of somebody that is colluded in that sort of worldview, and then you process it through. It looks like you're processing it through in the outer world, but you're really dealing sufficiently with your own boy on the bench.
Yep.
He's chilled out. Now you're truly able to go to a place of bigger possibility. Then who created? So those are the actions, and you take, and the outcome shifts in an entirely different place. Who created that?
Yeah.
You did that incredible outcome where you turn it into, you lift the whole thing into a win. And in that, instead of you colluding with a martyred story, you created an empowered story out of your choice making and intention to a bigger possibility. You fed it. You took care of the hit on the bench. You blew a bigger bubble, and he colluded in with that one because it felt better and because he was willing to get off. To get off it in a second. So, what I want to do at some point, I want to take the whole thing and thread it out because it feels like you just offered us a map. Like an Arthur Murray. You follow the footprints. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's such a beautiful map for how to move through a process for how to move through owning things and turning them.
I think that's fantastic, and that's right. And one of the up-leveling pieces, the up-leveling process, going back to the first segment where we were talking about, the most empowered self that I have at a particular time. And even in this moment, I'm seeing the more empowered self in this moment than that was playing along in that moment.
This is what makes you a great coach, though, because you're aware of all of these pieces, and it's constantly a bigger picture. And what is the bigger picture? Without losing sight of the current picture, right. What's the bigger picture?
It's the theme of what you and I have been doing with this show, that we want to dwell on the edge of possibility. That as an intention is going to keep bringing us back to the up-leveling process, because it's not like it ends. It's like, how much more mystery?
What do you usually call it? The biggerer.
The biggering.
The biggering.
Yeah, the biggering process. There's or the enough, like, the what is enough and then what is more. We've been playing with that juxtaposition, the small self, enough. If I can get this, I'll be enough. If I can get this, enough. And at some point, that whole hamster wheel is offset and juxtaposition by the part of me capable of more. So the shadow play is the enough, get. The opposite is the light play, the
knowing
light
more and more
shadow.
of who I am, of who I really am, and firing on more and
That's it.
more cylinders that
That's
they're always operating. They're just operating, buying into other people's.
And we've talked about this in terms of, one's the integration process, but we can't spend all of our energy in the integration process. There has to be a part moving forward. This is where the vision piece comes in. Is that, my present's a result of my sense of vision of the future, that I have this vision of possibility that's directing my choices set against the backdrop of the past, that I'm doing this dance of some part of it is integration and some part of it is projecting forward into possibility and keep going for more, keep stepping into mystery with a sense of what we want to generate and create, but knowing that the ride in itself will work us and take us somewhere unknown. And
It
next thing you
changes.
know,
It changes the present.
yes.
It changes the future.
Yep.
It also changes the past.
It changes the past because we hold it in a different
Anybody
way.
that's ever gone to a family reunion and talked about Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner 15 years ago knows that the past changes. What? That never happened.
That's right.
What?
That's right. No, that's right. It's so interesting how many times I see that thread come through, whereas I let go of something, I see it dissipate not only in my experience, but in what's reflected back. Because, and this threads back to the story, we're not all colluding and holding the same story anymore. Enough people have let it go, let's say within a collective, a family of origin structure, right? Aunts and uncles, cousins. Enough people have let that go that we don't need to tell that story anymore. It's not important to bind us anymore. We're not bound by that story anymore. We've actually loosened it to where there are more advanced stories to tell. There are greater possibilities to vest in and generate stories out of than those small stories that no longer serve where we're going. Right?
And maybe they're no longer even inside my linear time track because we're going quantum here.
Yeah.
And from the me that is in this vibrational state, that frequency doesn't have that past. I'd have to go to one of the boys on the bench. He had that past.
That's it. That's it. I love that. I personally love that. Because, look, again, let's go back to the intent based on love. From the love perspective, from that generosity of how do I have compassion, forgive it, how do I now view it, all problems shift to they're developmentally appropriate. They were opportunities. They shift in their entire perception. So what was real one day becomes more real by applying this love perspective, this compassion, acceptance, understanding, all those expressions of love. Hold it in a different way to where it morphs so that what it once was is almost unreconcilable. Unrecognizable or reconcilable, but unrecognizable. From this evolving,
It's a totally different frequency.
From this evolving self perspective.
It's like when KKZZ turned from a talk station to a country and western station.
Right.
There is no more talk on that show, on that station.
I want to call it evolving self. I just came up with that. I don't.
You want to call it evolving self?
Yeah, because we've done
That's great.
Observing a sense of selves, authentic self, evolving self.
I want to add in a distinction to it because
Please.
as you were speaking, I had an image flashed up on the inner screen of my mind when you said developmental.
Mm-hmm.
For the first time I saw developmental, I had a line down the middle. There's develop, and then there's mental. And that really says everything about the particular phase of evolution called developmental, which means up-leveling cognitions. But there are other kinds of cognitive processes beyond our ability to compute and strategize inside of logic. We have machines for that now.
Right, called computers.
So there are new kinds of logic, and then develop mental is a particular frequency.
Yeah.
There is something that is not even developed. And it's certainly not mental, and that has to do with love that spills over the very narrow confines of mental capacity.
Heart resonances.
And those are entirely mysterious. And when I certainly do, and I have for many years done my best to try and take something so enormous and shoehorn it in to mental cognition, make it develop mental. And it's apples and oranges.
Oh, and we're talking about a different operating system, a different develop. It's a developmental. Different stage.
It's a different stage.
Different stage
it's
of
not
the evolving self.
Yes,
that's what we're
exactly.
talking about.
Yes,
different stage of the evolving self.
And it's not even evolution and progress are not. Progress is not necessarily a function of evolution. The building of a relationship that knows itself to be a spiritual pursuit. That is no longer a linear progression.
Wow. So we did it. This is the spiritual...
Did we actually thread this back to the beginning?
Spiritual maturity. I think we did. So
there's a spiritual adulthood.
Spiritual adulthood. So we're so grateful you spent some time with us little boys learning our spiritual adulthood.
Exactly. And if any of you could figure out what we said, please let us know.
That's right.
And we'll be really grateful.
Yeah. And keep tuning in to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Thanks for listening.